Howdy everyone out there in Twitch land, welcome back to HexHunter, and today we're doing another General's Tent, and I'm here with my good friend...
Hey, it's Function here, hooray!
Oh man, haha! We just got trolled by Twitch again.
Yeah, I just got trolled by them too. It started up the commercial break. What did it do for you?
It slightly looped our commercial break there. Luckily, no one shows up in the first few moments and we can edit.
Well, there we go. Do we want to do the intro again? There can be the outtake intro. Or
the outtake intro, sure. So everyone, welcome back to HexHunter. I'm Mokog, and today we're doing another General's Tent. I'm here with my buddy...
Function, and yeah, this is General's Tent. We're on like week 5 right now of doing this, so that's pretty amazing that we are back on track with doing this on a regular basis.
I know, the amazement is... I have no words for it other than freaking awesome. I'm so glad that we are being the consistent that we want to be.
Yeah, and it's satisfying. It's been fun. I've been enjoying doing these. I mean, we always were, even when we weren't consistent. But doing them consistently makes it more fun. I
know, right? We always thought, it's like, man, what if we ran out of things to talk about? No, there's always something.
Yeah, no, actually, it's usually we have too much to talk about. We usually end up going a little bit past when we plan to. But speaking of which, today I am on somewhat of a time constraint. We can only go for another maybe 60 minutes or so, which is still plenty of time.
Okay, I promise I won't jibber jabber too much.
Well, I'm sure we will some.
Oh yeah, there's always a little bit of jibber jabber, or as I also like to call them, tangent dragons. Actually one of the biggest things going on is the lack of activity this week. That's actually it's unfortunate, but it's worth noting because it taunts me every day that I log in.
Speaking of taunting, I'll let you continue, but speaking of the lack of activity, I have maybe a smidgen of taunting to do.
Oh, okay. Well, so one of the things that hasn't been going on this past week have been tournaments, and I've really wanted to be able to get in and draft and, get in, try to see if I can get those last few cards when I'm doing my drafts and try to get in to do everything that I need to for the budget challenge. And every time I get home, someone's broke the server. And I don't know why you keep breaking the server, but you do.
Speaking of that, I was lucky enough to actually get in on a draft yesterday, and it went to completion, and it was probably the only one that did. Everybody else was complaining about bugs. But yesterday, they had been planning to bring the servers back up, at least for tournaments and everything. I mean, the game has still been running for the last week, but without tournaments, there's not a whole lot to do. But yesterday they brought them back up for a very brief window of time. They were maybe only live for about 15 minutes, but that was just enough time for me to get into one, do a draft, and it went pretty well for me. I won the draft. I took first place with like a Blood Sapphire deck where I managed to draft 2 copies of Air Superiority, which is kind of a bonkers card. It's definitely a little bit of build around.
You don't always find that doubled up in a uncommon's pool either, though.
No. I mean, that doesn't happen very often where you get 2 copies of it. Even just 1 is still very, very strong. But getting 2 is pretty bonkers, and so I went and tried to do the build around deck. I think I ended up having 8 flyers in the deck, and then so I used Feather a little bit more, and I had 4 Darkspire Priestess, which were also pretty good, but I actually only ended up playing 3 of them because it fit for the curve in the deck a little bit better. And I was playing Shadowgrove Witch, which actually I like in some decks, and this is one of the ones that wants them, because giving that one flight is basically like build your own Mystic of the Tranquil Dream, and it has that little upside of sometimes hitting very relevant cards when it comes into play. And then when you gave that flight with Air Superiority in play, it either becomes a 3/5 or a 4/6, which is pretty OP.
Yeah, so that's really snazzy in draft. So, while you got a chance to draft, while I was at work going, man, I really love this chance to draft. Oh, wait, I don't get to have one.
Yeah.
Tears. It was, I posted on Twitter, I'm like, the shakes are happening. Oh, God, it's terrible. I just can't. I gotta click the draft button, but no, I can only do constructed.
So we're doing that. I do have one little snippet to say about the draft, because there was a very entertaining moment within the draft. Is during round 2, well, let me rewind a second. This is my first time playing with the client really in a competitive setting with the new like F6 and F8 buttons, I think it is, the ones that pass priority.
You mean the trap buttons?
Yes, the trap buttons. They're definitely traps for me. I'm gonna mess myself up so many times with those, but they speed things up just enough that I mash them, and it will be the downfall of me. In this case, it almost was. Round 2, game 2. I won game 1, and we were in game 2, and it was looking like I was doing pretty well, but my opponent played a very early Ingenuity engine and was able to activate it, but I still had enough flyers and stuff that I was probably going to kill him with damage. At one point, I F'd 8 when I only had one 2-power guy that could have swung, and so I missed out on 2 damage. So, that happens, and it was a mistake that I didn't mean to press the button to go all the way through the turn and skip my attack step, or something like that, right? So then we went on to play the rest of the game, and it got pretty intense. We got into a stalemate where both of us were on the verge of killing the other player, and he had his Ingenuity engine and was creating a bunch of things, and at some point he created a malfunctioning warbot, which I forgot about, but eventually he gets me down to, and I kind of spoiled it just now, but eventually I get him down to 1 life, and then he swings back and has had pretty much what it was is he swung at me and did a lot of damage, and then I swung back, and because I didn't block with the Darkspire Priestess the previous turn, I wasn't able to kill him with the damage it did hypothetically on the 50-50 activation.
Gotcha.
But I swung back and I got him down to 1 life, and I was ready to concede. I had forgotten about the malfunctioning warbot, but then I pressed space instead of hitting concede, even though I had the concede weapon or the window open. So it starts his turn and immediately goes to sideboarding, which was really awkward for me because my finger was literally like moving down to press the mouse and say concede so we could start game 3. It immediately goes to the pairings window, and then sideboarding never happens. And I was like, well, that's kind of awkward. And then immediately round 3 starts. I realized, oh, the warbot killed him. That was so awkward. Like the way it happened too is the victory screen didn't pop up or anything, so maybe there was a bug involved in that. But just like that moment where and literally it took like 3 or 4 minutes after the game was over for me to realize what happened, and then like the squeaky wheels started turning. I was like, oh, there was a warbot in play. It totally killed him, didn't it? And yeah, that was pretty good. So that was my entertaining moment, and then I ended up taking round 3 of the draft. I won it, so that was fun. I've been missing draft, although I wanted to draft a ton yesterday since I had time to, and I was abruptly put to an end that after that one was over, they took them down. So womp womp, sad face. But yeah, with the lack of tournaments, things have been kind of slow going lately.
Yes, slow going, that's for sure. But we've been making the best use of the forums, I think, in the meantime, because you've been working on this past week's brainstorm, right?
Yeah, well, I kind of had, the thing is that last week's brainstorm, and we talked about it quite a bit on last week's show, is I'm doing the dungeon thing, and it's going to take place kind of episodically across a couple of weeks. Initially, I was planning on doing another maybe unrelated brainstorm this week while I figured out how we were going to move forward with the dungeon one, but we got so few submissions so far on the dungeons that I'm going to let it simmer for another week, and hopefully I'll get 2 or 3 more submissions I would be happy with. I'll try to put one in myself. You should put one in, Mokog, because you can probably actually come up with, like, this one's right up your alley. How have you not submitted something for this yet?
Hey, don't you remember? I submitted mine when we did our episode. I just didn't write it down.
Yeah, I guess
the Shroomnobi shall live again.
You need to write it down so other people can see it in case they didn't watch the General's time. But anyhow, back to brainstorm. This week, I'm not posting one just because I wanted to let, hopefully we'll get a couple more submissions on the Dungeons one. The idea there is it's just flavor. I get that probably some people are a little bit more intimidated with this one because we've really had maybe 25%, maybe even less than that, of the submissions that we normally get on the brainstorms. There's very few submissions so far on this one, and I get that it's kind of intimidating. It's one thing to come up with a card, but coming up with an entire setting for a dungeon, it's kind of time consuming, and then also people probably don't want to be looked at in a bad light or something. But there's no judging on it. And then as far as winning the prizes for participating, when there's only like 3 other people that have participated,
your odds
chances
are really
of being
good.
Chosen as the random winner is pretty high. So people need to go over the brainstorm. I'll say it again at the end of the show. And they need to go submit something so that we can move on to a new one next week.
Heck yeah! All right, so.
But that was my thing on the forums. You've been participating a little bit more on the forums yourself.
Yeah, so I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm particularly trolling the forums, but I am doing my best to remain really active on them right now. Yeah. So one of the things that I started thinking about what happens when you start looking at Hex from just a market standpoint versus when you start looking at it from an economic standpoint. And I was thinking, it's like, all right, well, who really wants what kind of data? Who really wants questions to be answered? Is our community just focused on how things are going to sell, or do we want to know, oh, we have so many amounts of drafters and they act this way so that we can understand that they do these other things? And, it's kind of like the question of how much context does any particular person want at any point in time?
Yeah.
And, which, to me, I find these questions really interesting to ask. I'm like, when we want data, do we just want our sale data that we get now, or do we want more holistic data, and do we understand the consequences that come with that?
Yeah, I know, at least in my, in just my personal outlook, and this really does apply just pretty much strictly to me. I mean, I'm sure there's others out there like me too, but a lot of the stuff that, like, you go so far in depth that a lot of it just goes over my head, I guess I would say. And I try to keep up with you and get all the terms and stuff right. But actually, I mean, tuning in on your stream the other night and listening in on you talk about it was pretty educational for me. So that's my thing, is it needs to be at least a little bit approachable for me to understand it. But on the other hand, I know there's a lot of people out there clamoring like really hard to get some interesting analysis of what's going on in the auction house or in the market in general, and nobody's really providing that. But I know you're kind of eager to.
It's there's some actually just recently a graphing resource went up that just hit the Reddit. That's actually pretty interesting, where they're starting they're starting to graph some of that data, which is amazing and fantastic. No doubt that's not really, really cool.
I like that one.
So that's a good resource that's going to be fantastic when we start tapping that resource. Then another great resource is going to be, we're also releasing the data too, and that makes a big difference. So I like to do some of the analysis, but at best I'm an amateur economist. Big focus on amateur, I would say. Because I have quite a ways to go in learning exactly how to do analysis, because one of the things I was talking about Yoss, who is another great resource on the forums, is we were taking he was bringing up some really good facts about one of the loops that I missed in some of the analysis. You'd be like, Mokog, what on earth did you miss on your loop analysis? You write really huge forum posts for no good reason. Well, actually, one of the cruxes that was going on was I was jumping to, even though I still think it's the most likely conclusion, that we're having a lot of currency leaving the market through our chest rolls, which to me seems pretty explanatory, but that's not, or pretty self-explanatory because of how the prices are working. It left a loophole for a situation where you could have just a huge glut of supply also hitting and affecting what the general price of everything is. Now, one of the reasons that I personally discounted something like that is... sorry, my song is presently annoying me, and it is going to go away. One of the reasons I discount that is because we have a huge amount of packs still that really haven't hit the market because of how high the pack price still is. The reason I say that is when I initially ran my Kickstarter numbers, the Kickstarter numbers provided a really good idea because you can calculate how many initial packs they handed out at the very beginning. They handed out a lot of booster packs. They handed out 1.7 million booster packs function. That's a lot of packs.
And
and it went out to like 18,000 people, and that was not counting everyone who paid through PayPal. So there's still even more than that.
And not to mention that, I mean, like, people have surely, I don't know how many, but I'm sure that a lot of people have bought packs off of the the store as well.
Mm-hmm. So when you take all the packs down in the store, all the winnings from everyone's free drafts from their pro player tiers and their collector tiers, and you start getting all of these factored in, you realize that there's well above and beyond that number of packs, and so you translate it out to commons. Well, if you have 1.7 million packs, you have an idea of how many commons there are going to be, Function? About 17 million commons.
Yeah, those are big numbers.
So,
one thing that so you were talking about kind of like supply of gold being rolled on chests and stuff. It'd be interesting to see just on the level of gold generation versus gold consumption on a draft of how much gold one 8-man draft generates versus the types of chests it generates. And you would have to know, like, I guess the rarity of each chest opening from a pack, but I think that might have been determined by now. Then you could figure out how much gold was actually being consumed by rolls when you're doing the draft. It would be interesting to see if it's a net gain or a net loss as far as gold goes.
Well, and it's Yas actually did quite a bit of write-up, and I don't know, I haven't vetted his numbers personally because I don't have the details on how he calculated them. But drafts can generally net a little bit of gold as long as the chests don't really have any rerolls factored in.
Yeah,
and when you factor in rerolls, and
especially
when you reroll rare chests, makes a big difference. So a lot of people, especially if you've got a couple good tournaments under your belt, you are going to roll and re-roll your commons and uncommons, chest-wise. So 1,200 gold to roll a common chest, you will roll that common chest 3 times and pay 3,600 gold because you can, if you get the opportunity to. But that's really only equal to about 1 uncommon chest. An uncommon chest, now you re-roll that sucker, well, now you've spent a much higher magnitude for each of those re-rolls you could have done. So that's 6,200 gold out of the economy right there. But then if you did that to a rare chest, it's 1,700 or 17,000 platinum to re-roll to do your second roll total for your gold consumption on a rare chest.
Yeah, so once you start talking about the higher chests, it definitely takes the gold out of the economy at a much faster rate.
Yep, and the thing is that the rare chests, you essentially are forced to roll on your rare chests.
Yeah.
Because what's going to come from the chance of a primal drop from a rare chest is worth rolling.
Yeah.
Because supposedly primal chests are going to be like the bee's knees and the most amazing thing since sliced bread.
Yeah, I want to know what's in these chests. I mean, I think everybody does, but I really want to know what's in these chests. What's in the box?
Yes, exactly. We all want to know what's in the box.
Yep.
No one denies the crazy awesomeness that's going to be stuff in the box, but it's got to occur at some point. And when it all comes down, people are going to whatever gold is glutted into the economy, whatever is there is whoosh going to disappear through chests if it hasn't already.
Somebody needs to make that into like a GIF, what's in the box GIF that's Hex themed, and make that a thing.
What's in the box?
If somebody makes that into a thing, I would totally donate packs to them. Probably not many, maybe just 2. But if somebody makes that into a GIF, I would, and still ties it into.
And it's like a chest, and all of a sudden,
yeah.
It's got this scene with Brad Pitt, and all of a sudden it's like, what's in the box? And it's a picture of the chest. Opens the box, and there's a box, and there's a picture of Princess Corey.
Yeah, or something. I don't know. Does that? I would totally donate packs to somebody who did that. So contact me if you're interested, and you will be paid in a very small number of packs for that. But moving on, what else we got? We were talking about goings on the forums. This kind of goes hand in hand with what we're talking about as the lack of tournaments and kind of a drought as far as streaming of Hex TCG goes. A lot of the other streamers have kind of taken a little bit of a siesta maybe
there's a little bit of a break that's going on. Actually, Neo was on a little bit today, which was kind of like you could call it a conversation session.
Yeah, I missed that. Hacky was on last night though, and I was tuning in with him playing a Rocket League game or two, and then he went and played some Smash DS, which made me want to get it. And I should hold off on buying games right now, but it definitely was tempting. But what were we talking about? Kind of a drought with the tournaments. That kind of goes right into us having some issues with our Hex budget challenge. Is we got off to such a great start. We put all this stuff together, put all this work into setting it up, and then what do you know? They take down the tournament. So I think both of us, at least for the budget challenge, are definitely waiting for tournaments to come back up so we can get back on the train.
I know I'm definitely waiting for them to be re-enabled so that we can at least try to get as much value as possible. Because we both essentially determined that drafting is the greatest value proposition that's in Hex presently. So the amount,
and it's a lot of fun.
One, fun. Two, amazing value that comes from it.
Yeah.
And when you're on a budget, you need to maximize your value when you play. So we could both go in and record league games, like we could go in and record rock games. We could go in and record our Proving Grounds challenges. And there's a certain amount of fun to that, but you only want to do so many of those when you're on your starter. 3 really good games when you're on your starter session is probably about the most that you could push on a permanent content basis.
Yeah.
Because you can't... Attempting to really get more than that is probably selfish. It's really unfair to your audience to push more than that.
Hacky's onto something. I could trade set 1 packs for a copy of Smash Bros. I would totally be willing to do that if there was some way to actually make sure that I got the copy and didn't just give the person packs and not give my Smash Bros. Anyways, but yeah, talking about doing having a lack of stuff to do is like you were saying. We could do the Proving Grounds games or do Rock League or do trading, but those are all kind of supplementary towards actually playing in tournaments. Those are going to be in videos without a doubt. But if we don't have actual the tournaments are really what everybody's interested in, and if we don't have access to those, doing the other stuff kind of seems, I wouldn't say a waste of time, but it does feel like that to some extent, that you could do that now or you could do it later, and if you did it later, you're going to get more reward for your time, I guess, or the cost-benefit analysis is better if you hold off on doing it.
Well, and it's one of those things, it's much easier to learn vicariously from watching someone draft than it is to see some of the different video types that are out there.
Yeah.
So you don't want to watch someone play on the auction house on a video. You'd rather have someone teach you how to use the auction house in a video. And that's kind of not where we're going with the budget challenge. The budget challenge is to prove that using the auction house to supplement your play style is beneficial. But you can do that with spreadsheets and showing how your games progress.
And actually, one more point on that before we move on, talking about the auction house, I think this has got to be true, is that since there's fewer people logging in, since tournaments aren't currently active, and there's fewer people needing platinum for entry fees or other odds and ends, that auction house use has fallen quite a bit. I've listed stuff on my budget account, hoping it would sell. And the idea there is that when it does sell, rather than doing this is me clicking and selling a bunch of stuff, like you were saying, that would just be a boring video. But you could definitely recap of hey, these are the last 10 things I sold at the beginning of your next draft, right before you join it. You could say, hey, this is the recent auction house activity on this account, and this is what we did. You go kind of do the breakdown that way. That kind of makes more sense than just doing a video dedicated to auction house stuff, because it'd probably be pretty boring.
It definitely becomes more of a, what's the best way to say it? It is harder to pull off when you don't have volume going through. So it's harder for us to sell, and it's harder for newer accounts to buy, because newer accounts rely on that volume coming from the auction house. New accounts need players churning through PvP tournament content so that they can afford commons, so that they can afford the uncommons.
The one thing I would say, though, is on the flip side, because that's totally true, is if drafts are happening constantly, they're generating a lot of cards much faster. But since tournaments aren't firing, the need for packs currently has gone down. And as you've noticed, maybe packs have dropped in price pretty significantly.
Yeah, the
by at
pack
least
prices dropped definitely.
somewhere between 15 and 30 cents. Yeah. So on that note, you can get packs for pretty cheap. I've seen people even advertising in chat that they would like trade packs for $1.20, which is a pretty great deal.
Which means if you're using your trade function, like actually going on using the trade Reddit, Hex TCG trade Reddit, using the forums, and filling out and keeping a trade binder, you can start trading cards directly for packs. And it may take like a couple Tatalkas to get a pack, but if you've got a decent legendary, I might be able to trade my Zoltog instead of just for direct platinum. I might be able to trade it for like 4 packs, and that's essentially going to be like a draft fee.
Yep.
One day, I'm hoping.
Yeah. All right. So we ready to move on to what's next?
Yeah. So you were sneaky because of your draft recently, weren't you?
Yeah. So I mean, I was kind of sneaky. I got lucky that I actually got a draft in. I think I'm like, what sliver of the population has actually been able to draft in the last 2 weeks? It's a very small group of people, I would assume, or maybe it's a week and a half. I don't know. It feels a lot longer than it has been. I'm going through the shakes, man. I got to get my draft fixed. No. So I was actually able to draft yesterday in a very brief window while they were open, and I did pretty well for myself. And so Mokog has this theory about Kismet, that there's a Kismet buff hidden in the game that you can unlock, and that if you win a tournament and then immediately go to start rolling chests, that Kismet buffs the chests, and that you are more likely to roll on good things. And I don't know. I mean, some of this is probably just superstition, and I don't want to egg you on too much to lead you to believe something that's totally not logically true.
I'm about to start preaching, brother.
But, and I know that you're about to start in on the Kismet buff reality, that it's real, and there's a conspiracy going on, and Corey's egged you on a little bit even, and I'm about to contribute to this, and I feel so bad that I'm contributing to your superstition that probably has no factual basis. But yesterday, I immediately rolled on the chest after I won the draft, thinking, hey, I gotta see if Mokog is a little bit right here. And before I say my results on that, historically speaking, the only time I got the Wrathwood, or when I got my Wrathwood Colossus sleeves, was when I had just won a draft with a Wrathwood Colossus. I like to think there was something going on there, so maybe even I'm a little bit superstitious, but I thought that was a nice coincidence. But going back to yesterday, so I roll on the chest. I have it written down somewhere. Let me.
Yeah, bring out the evidence.
Okay, so what did I get? The very first roll was a free spin. The second roll, and this is all in the same chest. I only rolled the one common chest. So the very first time I rolled it, I got a free spin. So I didn't get anything, but a free spin is a free spin. The next time I got an upgraded chest and a paid spin. So now it was an uncommon, and I kept rolling that uncommon chest. So now I got a gas troll on the third roll, and another paid spin. So far I'd rolled 3 times, and I hadn't whiffed yet, and I'd received 2 things, an upgrade and a gas troll. The 4th time I roll it, I get the Skywalker equipment, which I think is one of the more common ones. It's like the boots or something. I don't really know, but basically it wasn't another whiff. And then I got another paid spin off of that. So that was the 4th time I rolled. The 5th time I rolled, I whiffed.
Okay.
I didn't hit the jackpot necessarily. I didn't hit the jackpot by any means, but it could have been a lot worse.
So what I'm hearing is that it appears to be 7,400 gold, you got some PvE equipment, an upgraded chest, and a gas troll.
And a gas troll. And I wonder how much gold that gas troll would sell for. I should have looked, because that would have been interesting to know too.
A good rule of thumb is multiply it by about 130 to 140 on what its price is on the auction house. And that's your minimum floor. And then...
So, yeah, I have no idea what it sells for, but it's still... It maybe it does lend a very, very small shred of evidence towards your cause.
So, here's the thing. I've talked about my rolls before, but here's what I find is that whenever I attempt to roll just randomly, like I got a couple hundred gold and I just, opened a common chest from our draft picks, and there's video evidence on our general's tent, I have rolled diddly squat Kismet does not love the General's Tent when it comes to rolls. Now, but with that...
Siren in the background, sorry. It's sleeping. At least this time the Siren's driving fast rather than slow. Seems like usually when we're recording, they know and they just drive as slow as they can past the apartment. Anyhow.
So in any case, our rolls on after the General's Tent have been deplorable at best. We haven't even, like, I think we're even remotely lucky to even get a paid reroll on our stuff. Now, the problem that comes with that, though, is that when I compare this to the last time I rolled after a tournament, I get an alternate art, I get I ended up pulling a rare, and I think one of them was an alternate art Wrathwood Colossus. So, and this is all within, like, 3 rolls, and so I dropped 5k gold on those rolls. Oh no, that's what it was. I got my, I got the Bubble Mail, which is one of the harder to get PvE equipments from there, and it gave me 5k gold for my troubles. And that was the first roll after the tournament.
The Kismet buff is pretty real. Well, I should not say that.
You should not say that.
No.
But it's true. The Kismet buff is real.
No. You're gonna become like a raving lunatic over this. I see.
The power of the Kismet buff is real. Go compete in your tournaments. Compete in your drafts.
I mean,
go participate in your 128s. The larger the tournament, the larger the buff. You walk away with your 5k. You must lay the 5k at the well. Pay homage to Kismet, for if you do not, you shall then fail.
Oh, look at. We've created a monster. Anyways, but talking about that, I will say I noticed Neo does it a lot. There's a few other streamers that do it, and I think it started to catch on with me. Is that at the moments where both players are top decking, you know, those tense moments that are great in TCGs. I've noticed myself.
You know, like,
I don't know if the term is praying. That doesn't seem like the right term, but I've noticed myself asking Kismet to look kindly upon me when I'm top decking, and maybe I'll be lucky enough to draw what I was looking for.
If thou must beseech the favor of Kismet, one must not come on bended knee, but come with pockets full.
Must come with knocking over a camera. Let me fix that real quick. I was gonna see what. Somebody keeps buzzing me on the phone. And we got a wild Clarissa appears. Rah! The kitty cat buff is real too. But yeah, so that's the Kismet buff. It may or may not be real, but folks who are in the channel, be sure to roll chess as soon as you win a draft. That means like you have to take first place or any other type of tournament, and report back to us on Twitter or somewhere else if the Kismet buff is real or not.
Well, and it's not even just that. I think the degree at which you participate, so as far as you go, the length of time you're in an event, also the type of event, I believe, affects it as well. And the reason I say this is because it makes more sense for Cryptozoic to provide a buff for players who have participated in their large events as give-outs. Because if you looked at how they operated when they were Cryptozoic, they gave out promos and alternate art cards all over their WoW tournaments.
So even if you don't win, if you just participate in all the rounds, like you're talking like a large Swiss 128 player tournament, something where like you can go to round 4 and lose every single round, and even then you might get the Kismet buff. That might be
like I said, I'm not saying Kismet favors the winners. I'm saying Kismet favors the bold. Everyone receives something at the end of their tournaments. Everyone receives enough to at least roll on a common and an uncommon chest.
But Hacky's talking about sleeves buffing you. I gotta say, those Gen Con sleeves, I don't know what it is. Like, I have to say this, is that I don't feel like, I mean, I feel like I'm pretty decent at the game. I do well enough, and I regularly do well. But I gotta say, I feel like I'm luckier than I am good. It's like, sometimes it feels like that. And maybe that's just you being like a humble brag or something.
I'll defend you on this one, because you know what? It's not that the layer of skill is not there. It's that you are competing against a well-stocked and intelligent audience.
Yeah.
for everyone who's in the open beta or who's in the closed beta, you're competing against people who have the cards. You're competing against people who have the skills, who listen and participate in the community. Almost everyone that we touch on a day-to-day basis in the game is going to be familiar with something either that we've done or we might have said on the forums, and that means that they've read and looked up. Everyone's vested in the game. You're not coming against the quote-unquote scrubs that you might come across in like Magic Online early in the tiers. So your skill variance between gets minimized at that point.
I think that's somewhat true. I don't think that's enormously true. I think it maybe just a little bit. But
well, if you're coming up against Neo, and Neo's a fantastic player, he's done very well in the competitive scene, and you are both playing good decks that have a 50-50 matchup with each other, who's going to get it? What's going to swing a game more? Is it going to be skill, or is it going to be, oh wow, Function drew all the cards he needed to decimate everything in Neo's hand?
Well, I'll say this: if you're just going to use Neo as an example, and he'll say this too, is I just get lucky, and I kind of have against Neo. Like, I think my record against Neo has been undefeated, and I think most of it has been due to luck. Like I was top decking like a beast. I think we've only ever actually played against each other maybe 2 or 3, actually probably just 2 tournaments, and one of them was like the Challenge Series tournament or something. And I kind of top decked like a boss against him. It was kind of ugly.
Well, you know what? I've been top decked against as well, and there's something that can happen with top decks. If you build a fantastic enough deck that has enough utility to handle people throwing problems your way, all of a sudden it's skill that allowed you to get through instead of the deck building that went in to create it to begin with.
Yeah, actually,
now, unless of course you go like extinction, counter magic, bomb, which you might have done.
So what I would say, and you kind of touched on this, and this is a really big point, as far as like people saying like lucky when you're top decking and stuff like that, something people really got to keep in mind in this before they start saying, oh, you won because of luck, and they're trying to like smack talk their opponent, like, because really saying to your opponent, oh, you just got lucky that you top deck, like, you're kind of downplaying their skill and saying that it wasn't really them who won it and stuff like that. But there are decks that top deck better than other decks. That goes without saying. That's just a fact. Like, really aggressive early game decks, in general, they don't top deck well. They might still have amazing top decks where they top deck a burn to the ground and do 12 damage off it, and that ends the game. Sure. But probably a majority of their cards are going to just fall by the wayside. So some decks top deck better than others, and you kind of have to be aware of that when you're playing, because it kind of tells you in one way of your deck whether it wants to play the early game or the late game, whether it wants to get into top deck mode. Generally, I like playing decks that get into top deck mode, so maybe that's what part of my perceived luck has to do with. But yeah, like Hacky was saying in chat, it's better lucky than good, and I feel like I got a little bit of both going for me.
Well, and one of the things along your point, top decking is really great for control decks and decks that need a more moderate amount of speed. And so you enjoy playing Sapphire and I enjoy playing Blood. Both of these have 2 very good control style decks. So someone not being able to put a threat down every single turn can be very valuable to those decks because it allows them the space to breathe, to set up a more secure position, and then it becomes a matter of who can maintain control of the board as well as control of the respective resources and hand sizes. And that kind of battle becomes more skill based, but we're not going to see those more commonly than the deck types we have until we get different cards in each of the different formats.
That's the case for constructed, but even in draft, like a huge thing in draft is not only, drafting a powerful deck that has a strategy and that all the core cards either work towards that strategy or work towards preventing your opponent from reaching what their optimal strategy is. Draft is very deep, but the other part about it is literally knowing every single card in your deck as you're playing. You might be in game 2. If you don't know every single card in your deck that you chose during the draft series off the top of your head while you're playing the game, you're going to lose more often. That's just what it is. You're not going to be able to play to your outs. Being able to play to your outs and see a couple turns in advance and say, this is what's likely to happen if I draw these cards. This is how it'll play out. If I draw these other cards, this is how it's played out. And based on like the probabilities of doing each, this is the optimal play, stuff like that. Those are going to cause you to win a lot more often. And the other part is everybody's guilty of this, and myself especially, in kind of what I was saying about the draft earlier even. If you're not confident that you have 0 outs, like, you know, sometimes you really do have 0 outs, you might as well just concede the game. Sometimes you want to play it out to get more information from them, or to maybe run down their clock a little bit if they're playing really slow, because that's their choice if they want to play slow.
Yep.
But, you know, if you still have outs, you should not concede. You should not give up early. Like in that game earlier, I didn't see that I still had outs. I didn't think that... I forgot about the malfunctioning Warbot, basically. I forgot that I still had a 50-50 chance of actually winning the game, which is pretty good odds considering that my opponent had lethal on the table, and that otherwise I was ready to concede. But on the flip of a coin, I could have still won the game, and I did.
Yeah.
But if you're not able to consider all the factors, don't concede early, and don't give up on yourself so early, because a lot of people do that. They'll be stuck on like 2 resources 7 turns into the game, and they'll still be able to come back. Like those drafts I had against Colin in the budget challenge draft, like those are still some of the most intense games I've played, and the reason they were is because of either resource screw or flood. Like that's what actually made the game interesting. I was able to come back from some. Colin was able to come back in ways that he did, and they played out extremely, extremely well. Those were great games. I mean, they're on YouTube if people want to watch them. And I'm not just saying that, but they were good games. Clarissa, you're knocking over the camera again. How could you?
Danger, cat is danger, danger.
Yeah, I know. She's like rubbing her chin on the cord for it. I don't know why she does that. But anyhow, I'm just saying, because we got started talking about luck and stuff.
Yeah. Are you ready for
It's about who can manipulate their luck.
True, yeah. Very true. Now, speaking of YouTube, though, we were actually talking about something that we were preparing for set 2.
Yeah.
So for those who may have not have followed both of us since 2013, one of the big things we did early on is me, Function, and Guer took a look at the PDF that Hex released for everything that they were bringing out in set 1, and we went through every single card available, all the way through even the tokens, and we went for 2 sessions of at least 5 hours apiece going over every single card. And that was fun, but it was also very grueling. You get towards the end of the 4.5 hour mark, and you're like, so yeah, this card sucks because you know the reason why this card sucks. # better than sorrow. And in any case, one of the things that we were considering doing this time, and especially if we have a lot of community interest in it as well, is going in and taking a look at the spoilers presently released between Gen Con and what's been spoiled officially, and taking a look by shard to see what set 2 is beginning to look like thus far. Okay,
so I kind of envisioned it a little bit on the best way for us to do this, kind of the most devourable way. But first, I did want to say something. There's Iltree here in chat was saying one of the biggest luck factors is whether you draw the shards you need or not.
True.
And that's true. It is a factor of luck, and if you don't draw the shards you need, oftentimes you can still win games. I guess there's a level of to what extent are each of us saying that. I would actually say that probably the biggest luck factor is in constructed who you get paired against. In bigger tournaments, there might be some decks that absolutely hose yours, and if you manage to dodge them all the way to the finals,
that's
the
true.
amount of luck involved there is actually pretty big. And that goes for any TCG, not just Hex. It goes for Magic or WoW or I don't know, Pokemon, other games. When there's a well-developed metagame, if you get lucky enough to dodge the right decks in the tournament, that does so much work for you, more so than sometimes your play skill or anything else can do. Pairings is a huge factor that people kind of, some people overlook, or some people realize how important pairings can be and everything. And it's just kind of interesting to watch a tournament when they actually display all the pairings that go through and you kind of know who's playing what decks, is to imagine it had pairings been different, how might the tournament have played out and stuff like that. That's one of the things I find most interesting to follow along in bigger tournaments, even if I'm not participating in said tournament. Anyhow, moving back to set 2 reviews, what we were talking about is kind of looking at what's currently spoiled and also maybe doing a retrospective on set 1.
Oh yeah. Oh goodness, we need some time on a set 1 retrospective.
So what I had envisioned is that with what we currently have, it would be a waste of time to do a full set review on the spoilers, because there are quite a few spoiled cards, but also I think we have like 60% of the set, maybe less than that. I can't quite remember off the top of my head. Spoiled. We would need to redo everything if we were going to do it once the cards came out.
True that.
What we could do, and what I would like to do, is do a retrospective on set 1, and we would probably just talk about either constructed or draft, and maybe do an episode each for constructed and draft, where each of us would just pick 10 cards that we thought were all-stars or big performers, that kind of highlight just what it was like to play set 1, maybe cards that at one point were really good and aren't anymore, or how the metagame has shifted. And there is a draft metagame, even though you don't walk in with your own deck, there definitely is a pulse to draft overall, of players saying, early on people might have thought Boulder Brute strategies were amazing, and then later on they might have thought that they weren't so good. But who am I kidding? Boulder Brute's always the best strategy. But you get what I mean with that. So hopefully what we can do is we can do a couple kind of like bonus general tents. Maybe we'll do them on a different day to broadcast them so that it's outside the window of this, because I would expect each of them to take about an hour like our usual ones do. But we would do the set 1s I was describing, and then maybe for set 2 we would just do the same thing where we each of us picks 10 cards. We do a little countdown, maybe for constructed and for draft, or however we decide we want to do it. I think that would be a good way to kind of, in a sense, pass the time. Then when it comes time for us to actually have a full spoiler, we could look at things a little bit more in depth. And I don't know what the best approach to doing it is. You and I have talked about it a little bit, that whether we should do a video or an article or something posted somewhere. The nice thing about an article is you can quickly go back and look at it and say like, oh, this is what they thought of this card, this is what they thought of that card, this is where they're wrong, this is where I agree with them, and kind of get your own feel on the draft format and stuff like that. With the video, that's a little harder to do, but you and I are both video guys, so
that's true.
Yeah, so we gotta figure it out.
It's one of those things, when it comes to those, I think we definitely want to stick with our strong suits on there. Just, if you're decent at doing something, find a way to be even better at what you're doing, and then maybe learn something along the sides. So like, for instance, one of the things I need to learn to do a little bit more on the side is I need to learn better picks. So I think it's a great idea to do kind of your retrospective and your set 2 idea, where you pick 10 cards that you think were really influential, and then we'll compare our notes and make sure we each do like different cards so that we're talking about something different, and then do the same thing for set 2 and make sure we're all talking about something different.
Well, then, we don't need to make sure that we were talking about something different, but each come up with our list independently, so that it would be interesting to see where we agree.
Oh yeah, independent lists, because my thought is that if our top 6 cards all happen to be very similar, it might be a good idea to mix it up a little bit, because then all of a sudden we're going like, oh yeah, this card is frippin' amazing. Why are you not playing Zentoth's Inquisitor? It was used 54 times in the Hex TCG Pro Challenge Series in their Invitational.
Sure. Yeah.
Which is great for 2 of us maybe to mention, but does the 3rd of us need to mention if we were bringing Gwen on it? Now, when it comes to full set reviews, though, I really, really like how some of the Magic set reviews are done, and I'm actually specifically thinking of how the Star City Games guys do it, where they go card by card, color by color for Magic, and they do just, some of them are really quick. They do, which they've mastered, by the way, which is fantastic, because they ramble, but they ramble more concisely than we do.
Sure.
But they go in and they give kind of various perspectives, and they spend more time on certain cards than other cards, and they that type of style I think would be very beneficial for Hex, because 1, it gets views, 2, it grabs attention, 3, it's informative, and 4, if it works, don't fix it.
Yeah, and I think I've come up with a system for grading the cards on, at least for a video. I think if we were going to do it, we need to come up with like stuff at the bottom of the screen, maybe, to keep people attached. Like it says this card, this number, and that way they kind of know where we are along the set as we're going through it. That way people don't tune out and stuff like that, maybe. But I do have kind of a grading scale that I think would work for us, and it's not a numbered one. So hopefully that'll work a little bit. We'll definitely talk about it, but I like the idea of doing, like, we're just going to talk about Sapphire cards. We're just going to talk about artifact cards between each segment, so it's not just one massive lump that nobody can really keep up on. We were planning to do the giveaway while we were talking about this. You want to get the giveaway going?
Yeah, I was actually just thinking about that because it's about to start. So, for those who are not super familiar with the system, if you've been watching, you've been earning shards this entire time. For 5 shards, you can enter in. If you want to check your shards, I believe it is ! My shards. I'll tell you how many you have. This time we're giving away 3 sets of 2 booster set 1 booster packs. So to do that, if you want to check your shards, do ! My shards. Then once you know how many shards you have, everyone's going to get a single entry, so it's fairly decently fair, and we're going to pull 3 people from those entries, and I'm seeing them fill up, which is fantastic.
I'm not entering. I just want to see how many shards I have.
Then so in any case, while we're doing our crack the pack, we're going to let the entries fill up, and then 3 people from the list are going to be able to they're going to get 2 packs from the general's tent.
Yeah, so for today's packs, I do have, I hate that I'm going to say this because I know it's kind of a pain in the ass for people, but I recognize most of the names in here, so that's a good thing. This will make things a little bit easier. I'm going to be doing the packs myself this time around. We're going to be giving out 6 packs total, 2 to 3 different people, right? That's pretty, 2 times 3, that's easy enough to understand. I do have to run out the door pretty much as soon as we're done. Okay. So we're going to take down the names, and I'll contact you somehow. And I'll just send them in the mail. Actually, even the better one, if you really want to help me out and make it easy, once we announce the winners, just message me, Funktionfails, on Twitch. I'll even type something in chat, that way you can click on my name and click message, and it'll be foolproof for you. Just message me your Hex in-game name, and then when I have a chance later tonight to log in, I will have the name and I can just mail it to you. You don't even need to be online. That would be incredibly easy, wouldn't it?
Because we can mail stuff now.
Yeah, we can mail stuff now. So that's what we're going to do. Just do that, and it will be all easy. Send me a message.
All right, I know we're brushing up on our 60-minute mark. You should be able to see the pack now, right?
Yeah, so I can see the pack.
Okay, so our rare is Blessing of the Fallen, which is really cool for certain types of constructed decks. I find it's really rough to pull off in draft.
Yep.
But I see a standout card in our uncommons that is amazing to me, and that actually is our Hellhound. Looks amazing. Yeah. I found that whenever you pass a Hellhound, it tends to beat you later.
Yep.
But then you have
very, very good.
Other great cards like Cerulean Mentalist as well.
And Hellhound's also fairly easy to splash. Like,
oh yeah, because it's only a single
could be your
Ruby.
Secondary color, and you're still gonna have a beast mode Hellhound. Like, giving him the unblockable gem means that he needs to be dealt with very, very quickly, because he will swing for 12 damage or 11 damage or something dumb and end the game very, very abruptly. So you have to deal with him. That's pretty much the definition of a bomb in my book. There's a flies flying around here. So that's the definition of bomb, I would say, and he is definitely pretty bomby. So I mean, I think right off the bat, I haven't looked at even what the commons were, but I would imagine that's probably the pick.
Yeah, I
Hellhound is kind of slam dunk a lot of the time.
Windmill slam, boom.
Yeah. If we're going to talk about Blessing, the problem there is hypothetically it can work in draft. I was talking about air superiority earlier, and they're similar in a lot of ways, is that they don't themselves add to the board state. They will not do damage, they will not do any number of things that will help you win, but the troops that you continue to play will be better. The thing here, though, is that air superiority is actually easier to build around than Blessing of the Fallen is.
Yes.
The problem with Blessing is that not only do you have to have a bunch of Inspire troops, some of which are really hard to pick up, and sometimes they're just not that many opened. As opposed to flying, it's really easy to get flying stuff. And even if you don't, you can always use Feather and then do it. The other thing with Blessing is that you might pick a couple Inspire guys and try to build around it. It's a little bit more of a trap in that sense. And then the final part of why it's a little bit trickier to use is, in order for Blessing to pay off, you have to have actually had the troops in the graveyard. And that means in some way things needed to not go in your favor. Either they didn't go in your favor, or you were trading evenly. You were kind of on card parity, where you were trading your Ruby Pyromancer for theirs, or I don't know, some other kind of trade, troop for troop, 1-for-1 trades, and then you're hoping to play the Blessing and come back and get the value out of your Inspire troops, even though you traded with them. That's kind of fair, but when I say it's harder to pull off Blessing in draft, I really mean it's not particularly easy to pull it off in draft compared to other build around cards.
I would say if you want the challenge to build in draft because you have nothing better to do with your draft, go for the Blessing. But if you want the maximum chances of winning, you're going with the Hellhound.
Alright, so going back on other cards in here, we have Research Librarian, which is extremely good. It's easy to end up drawing cards off of him if you have other threats in your deck. He's really vulnerable, and that's why I say that, is that like Burn is pretty much his nemesis.
Burn and Sapphire's Charge.
Zerid isn't very good against him, since you have to hit him twice, and Sapphire's Charge is great against him. The thing with Researcher Adept, even if you don't have all that many artifacts, it's still possible for you to draw a couple cards off them, and that's pretty powerful. But with that said, he's not going to be an early pick, because a lot of the time, for him to really shine, you have to have the other cards, and so that's why you see him wheel a lot of the time. True. Is that he kind of relies on the right setting to be built for him. But going back onto Mentalist, so like all three of the uncommons are decent, at least. They're all pretty good. The Mentalist is really strong. It's easy to make it so that you play a turn 3 Mentalist and then a turn 4 Flyer of some sort, or an evasive guy, a Gemcraze Berserker, or a Brittle, or an Effigy and Nolzan, I think is the name. It's easy for Mentalist to work out in your favor, and it kind of it changes the pace of the game a little bit. If your opponent doesn't want you to draw the cards, in a lot of cases they need to play differently. If they were on the aggressive, they all of a sudden need to hold back some of their guys on defense so that they have something to block whatever you're going to swing with and draw a card. A lot of times, if you're the person with Mentalist, you can swing with 2 guys knowing that one of them is going to die and throw them away on purpose just so you can draw a card. That's perfectly fine. It works well with Polka, as we know. And then there's a whole lot of factors with Mentalist that make it a good card. It changes the way the game plays once it's on the table. The other thing, though, is there's a lot of times you play at turn 3 and you don't have something to follow it up with. That does happen.
Well, and there are times that it still has a good back end on there, so it can take some of the early stuff decently. It'll absorb a combat trick if you need it to. One of the other things I like about this pack is it's got decent wheel potential.
Yeah,
what comes back around. So
it has a lot of strong cards in here.
There's a good chance that after you're going to grab your Hellhound, someone's going to grab the Mentalist. But even if you start picking out a few picks from here later, maybe your Quick Strider comes around, maybe the Diamond Aura comes back around, maybe Chargebot comes back around. Maybe Blessing of the Fallen comes back around, and I get to take my little rare draft in the part of the picks where it's okay to.
Pretty much the worst case scenario for this wheeling is that you're going to get an Insight Fury, and that's not a very great thing. Insight
that's
Fury
also
is
really good on a Hellhound.
But it's pretty good on a Hellhound, and if you kind of and that is definitely like the Lionel Flynn deck, I like to call it, where you just attach an Insight Fury or a Lionel Flynn charge power onto like an Effigy or a Berserker or I don't know, a Wailing Banshee. A Wailing Banshee is really good in this case. It's pretty easy to smash through with a lot of damage and kind of quicker than your opponent can react to it. So Insight Fury is not really the worst thing in the world. If you're taking the Hellhound, there's still a whole bunch of good cards in here. The Mystic, both the Sapphire uncommons, Diamond Aura is pretty strong. I know that it has the drawback of you need to swing and kind of lose the Steadfast on the guy, but that's why it's actually pretty good to play it at the during your opponent's end step, use it as a defensive combat trick, or any number of things. But Diamond Aura is still totally playable. I'll play it pretty frequently.
I like this good pack. It's not super rare heavy on its rare juiciness, but its Hellhound makes it definitely worth it.
Yeah.
Now I know
And
you're running low on time here pretty soon, right?
yeah, so we're cutting down. I guess we should end it, but I mean, I'll go through the rest of the ringer real fast. Is that Ruby Lance? Obviously, it's pretty good, and hopefully that wheels for you. Because yeah, Ruby Lance is pretty good, especially if you're going heavier into Ruby. That by the time you can play the Hellhound, you're gonna be in pretty good shape. There's also a Quick Strider and Inquisition in there, and both of those are totally playable. Inquisition's clearly pretty good in the right decks, and Quick Strider can kind of really muck up the game.
Oh yeah, Quick Strider can be a big thorn in the sides, especially if you've got decent combat tricks to support him.
Definitely.
Alright, so we are at our last chance here. We have our entries, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and I realize this is not going to be perfectly timed. Alright, you ready for the picks, my friend?
I'm ready. Let's see it.
Our first winner is Plague Dealer.
Okay.
Plague Dealer has also been really fun, active on the forums too. We've been going back and forth on some good stuff.
Okay, so who are the other winners we got here?
Our second winner is Easy to Be Bad. Easy has been a pretty good regular on the channel the last several streams.
Yeah, I definitely recognize the name.
And then our final winner is Ashwan Jaguar. That is the second time he's been on the stream. The stream.
I probably already owe Aswan some packs. I need to go back and look. Now that I think about it, I owe a couple people packs, and I don't think I wrote them down, but I know where I wrote them down. Just not in the document I normally do. I need to go figure that out. Anyways, so what was it? Plague Dealer, Easy to Be Bad, and Aswan Jaguar. Please, sure, it's time consuming for you. It takes a minute or whatever, but please do it. Message me on Twitch, and then I will send you the packs later tonight when I'm back home, because I have to run right out the door and I don't have time to, unfortunately, right now. So send me Funktionfails on Twitch. I posted the 3 winners, and you can just click on my name and message me, and it's easy. You don't have to do anything else. Message me your in-game name, and I'll send you the packs. Hooray! Congrats for winning, and thank you for tuning in.
We got a common chest. Yep. Are we going to get anything from Kismet? We got something from Kismet.
What do you get?
We got a lightning elemental and a paid spin.
Oh boy.
So, alright, so shall we spin again?
Of course.
Let's spin again. It's very rare that we've gotten double spins this way. I don't think Kismet liked the second spin. No, Kismet didn't like the second spin. So we got lucky. We got something. Maybe Corey or Data Dragon was tinkering behind the scenes. Maybe they can actively flip the nozzles.
While you're streaming, there's also a Kismet buff. She knows.
Yes. While you're streaming, there's also a Kismet buff. It recognizes, it tells that your traffic from your computer is different now.
I like it. But anyhow, that's pretty much a wrap for the General's Tent for tonight. We've been on a good roll doing these every Wednesday night. Sometimes we do them a little bit earlier than others, and that's just because I have my board game night that I'm about to go out to and play with a bunch of friends. I got, what was it? Heroes Wanted, I think is the name, that finally came in the mail. I kickstarted that one. That one's pretty cool. I've been enjoying that. It's a lot of fun. So we'll probably play that tonight and play some other stuff. But back on to General's Tent. Tune in next week, and hopefully we're going to have an idea pretty soon of how we're going to be doing these set reviews and kind of look back on set 1 thing. We might do them on an alternate day or something along those lines. Maybe it'll be a YouTube video, but stay tuned to us both on Twitter and just on here on our show. And I'm sure you guys will know soon enough. On Twitter, I'm at Funktionfails, and Mokog is at HexHunter Mokog. You got any closing remarks for us, Mokog?
Let's see. You asked them to follow. Check. Follow us on the channels. Also awesome. Follow us on the Twitter. Very nice. Be sure you also check out the official Hex TCG page on Facebook, because they hide stuff there. It happens periodically. You'll get cool little pictures and random updates from there. And be sure that you also check out some of the streamers below. They will be active off and on. Be sure you check out Hacky's channel, because Hacky is awesome, and he helps also support the General's Tent by being here and being all active and stuff.
Yeah.
And show the community love. Be happy and good to each other, and don't be trolling.
Yeah. Don't be jerks, because we're better than that.
Yes.
No, actually, on that note, speaking of community stuff, for anybody who's still tuned in and watching who hasn't clicked the close yet, if you haven't contributed to the brainstorm yet, the most recent one, the dungeon one, at least take a look at it and consider posting on there. It doesn't have to be anything complex. I would really like to get a couple more submissions on this current one that's going before I close it. So help us out there. And what we're doing is we're doing like dungeon settings. So just go in there and post something. We're just looking for the flavor, the lore aspect. You don't need to worry anything about mechanics or coming up with what the dungeon is going to be like from one level to the next or anything like that. You're just coming up with the lore. Is it a battle of the headless horseman or headless executioner trying to find his head, or some other obnoxious nonsense? It can be whatever you want, but come up with something that's kind of interesting and can be built upon, and post it on the brainstorm thread, because we need some more posts there.
Yeah, participate. We love you guys. We love hearing from you.
Oh yeah. Even Brynhilder, which I think is Adam AOE, and even Aswan, he usually participates in them. They're both saying we need to get more on there. So yeah, do that. And
all right. Yeah. Thanks for spending your afternoon and evening with us, and y'all have a fantastic morning, evening, or night. Oh God, we're around 24 hours around the world now.
Yeah, peace, guys. Have a nice one.